Make sure I get some slides here. Hang on. There we go. So weaving together the stories of women's lives. That's the theme of this year's Women's History Month. And I started thinking about that and thinking about weaving. What do I know about weaving? I don't weave anything. Anybody here weave anything? I know, me either. All right, there's something more going on than I do understand you have a textiles product line, but I'm thinking that it's probably woven by the time you actually move it somewhere, right? And you're making flags. Anyone here from your flag section? All right, so let's try something else. Anyone crochet? Knit. Okay, how about macrame? Anybody sew on the occasional button? Yeah, that's what got me. Yeah. So as I was thinking about what it meant to weave together the stories of our lives, you know what? It really occurred to me is that it's really more about the threads that run through our lives. So I'm going to ask you to think right now, kind of rewind yourself to when you were a child. And think about some event that happened to you, or maybe something that someone said to you that was so impactful that it colors your life and your work still today. My dad used to always say, you never know until you try. It's so annoying. You never know until you try. So just think about that. What is it for you from way back then that still impacts you today? And we're going to come back to that at the end of the program this morning. So as I thought about this weaving together these threads that run through your life, I thought I'll just bring some of mine to share with you. So let's see what we've got in here. This one, teach. Teach. Can you think of some of the amazing teachers in your life? General Shapiro just shared some of his with us. Now, throughout the program today, I'm going to share with you just a few of the women who are being honored nationally at Women's History Month. So let me introduce you to Judy Young. The remarkable thing about Judy is that she translated poems off the walls of the Angel Island Immigration Center from the Chinese women. Then she also interviewed some of those Chinese women because she wanted to teach us that the stereotypical Chinese doll was actually a three-dimensional, robust Chinese woman. That's what she wanted to teach us. And it made me think about one of the major teachers in my life. As you heard, I was an engineer with the U.S. Department of Transportation for 25 plus years. And in the course of my career, I worked with a woman who was my boss, and I consider her to be my mentor. But we never sat down to have a cup of coffee together to talk about career development. We never once had any kind of formal mentoring arrangement. I learned by watching her. I remember this time. I had a good friend who sat a few cubicles down from me. Anybody here working cubicles? Yeah, it's kind of Dilbert land. So yeah, he worked a few cubicles down from me, and he was part of a team, a group of people that was working on some project. Anybody here work on teams? Yeah, that too. He was part of this team, and the team was exchanging emails back and forth. And something happened in one of those emails that just ticked him off. And he needed a vent. So he was going to write an email and send it to a friend of his in another part of the building. So let's just say he wrote an email that had some unusually colorful language that you would not necessarily expect to see in a federal government email. And he hit reply all. Yeah. Someone on the receiving end of that email forwarded it to our boss, this woman. Now, I have to tell you about this woman. I have never worked for anyone with more integrity in what they did. I've never worked for anyone who took more seriously their role as a public servant like you do here. I know that when she saw that email from one of her staff, that it ticked her off too. Now, I was telling Ruben a little while ago that the program I'm going to share with you today is not my normal program. Normally, I'm doing professional development on leadership decision-making, on cognition and intuition, and neuroscience. So what I can tell you from my work with neuroscience is that when she got that email, and it was so against her value system, it ticked her off too. And everything in her body and in her brain was conspiring to have her make a knee-jerk reaction. But here's what she did. She forwarded that email back to my friend, and she said to him, "We need to talk about this tomorrow." What do you think he did all night? Yeah. He came in the next day to meet with her, and she said, "You know, I know you didn't intend to send this, and I know that you know how wildly inappropriate it is. All I need to know now is how it's not going to ever happen again." Do you think that was more impactful than if she had lost her cool in the moment? She taught us through her behavior. And so that's my question for you. What are you teaching? What are you teaching? When people see you here at work, when they see you at home or in your community, what are you teaching? Because that's what people are going to learn from. You have a handout in front of you. I'll ask you to take a look at that handout, because on that handout, there are some words, some adjectives. And I want you to take a moment to think about what people are learning from you when they observe you here at work. And just check off the boxes. Think of a couple of words. You can fill in whatever is on there if there's not a word that suits you. And then just turn to your neighbor and tell them one or two words that you want to teach others when they observe you here at DLA. Go ahead. Share with your neighbor. Okay, so now that you've shared it with your neighbor, it is much more likely to stick with you. Okay, let's look at another thread that's running through our lives. Let's see what I find in here. Ah, yes, one of my favorites. This one says, inspired action. Inspired action. You see, here's the thing. Everybody here faces obstacles. Sometimes the obstacles are small. You know that annoying person that's on your team that never can quite get their work done on time and everybody else to take up the slack? Oh, but see, I didn't think that ever happened here. That's an obstacle. Some obstacles that we face are much bigger, health issues, family issues, but everybody here faces some obstacle. And it's a matter how you inspire yourself to achieve in spite of that obstacle. I want to tell you about my mom. My mom is about this tall. But in the late 1960s, she was about this tall. The difference being made up of Marge Simpson hair. Now, my mom is an only child. She grew up in a small town of Smithville, Texas, outside of Austin, on a little farm. And by all accounts, she was spoiled and pampered, or as spoiled and pampered as a little girl can be growing up on a farm in Smithville, Texas at the end of the Great Depression. She was the cheerleader in high school. She dated the football star. And then she married the city slicker, my dad. My dad moved into town from San Antonio, Texas, to be the band director in Smithville. Now, see, my dad was also an Air Force pilot. He flew DC-3s. But at that time, he was in the reserves, and so we never moved around or anything. So he married my mom, he had me and my little sister, and they moved into this cute little house, little wood frame house in Smithville, to set about living their normal life. And that was when the call came. Perhaps some of you here know about that particular phone call. That was the phone call that said that he was to report to active duty the next morning. They had less than 1 day to prepare. My mom told me because I was a big girl, I could get up early the next morning to say goodbye to my dad. She was true to her word. I still remember her coming into our bedroom and very quietly shaking me awake so as not to disturb my 3-year-old sleeping sister. She followed me through the house as I padded softly in my little footed pajamas to our front hall. The house was dark and quiet. The only light that was on was the light that was spilling out under the doorway of my dad's closet, and I could hear him rattling around in there. I remember standing there in that hall, scared, uncertain, and confused. And as I stood there, my dad stepped out into the hallway with his duffel bag and his uniform on. And honestly, that's the last memory that I have until the day he came home from his time serving in Vietnam. And see, I've told that story just a few times. Every time I've told it, I thought it was his story until I was preparing for today. And I realized it's her story. She was the one standing there with a little 8-year-old girl, scared, uncertain, and confused, and a 3-year-old asleep in the other room, watching her husband walk out the door. They didn't know where he was going, for how long, or with what outcome. And while he served his country, she held it together. She took care of 2 little girls. And let me tell you, I was sick every day at the same time the entire time he was gone. She took care of us. She managed all the finances. She managed all the maintenance on the house, the maintenance on the car. She held it all together. I talked to her yesterday. She's 84 years old, still in Smithville, Texas. I talked to her yesterday and I said, "Mom, how'd you do it?" She said, "I don't know. It had to be done. There was nobody else to do it. I just did it." She was inspired to action, and she found a way to do it. Let me share with you about Gladys. Gladys, I can't pronounce Gladys's last name. Gladys is a medicine woman for the Mohegan tribe. Now, she had a lot of notable accomplishments. The one that I found most captivating is she started a family museum about her tribe with the philosophy that you can't hate someone you know a lot about. Isn't that beautiful? You can't hate someone you know a lot about. But let's be real. Somebody out there is going, "Well, she never met crazy Uncle Harry." So here's the thing about the obstacles that you face. You have to have a way to overcome those obstacles. So also, there in your handout, I want you to look at these questions. And if you have a pen with you, take just a moment, and I'm going to ask you to answer question number 1. So just jot down, and so this is another thing. Do it very quickly. Do not overthink this. Do not make it harder than it has to be. This does not have to be like the great American novel. What do you want to achieve in your life? It might be raising your kids. It might be doing a good job. It might be serving your country. What do you want to achieve in your life? And just jot something down there. And then I'm going to ask you to also answer either question number 2 or question number 3. Question number 2 is to think about a time when you felt powerful. Maybe you were leading a team. Maybe you were working on an important project and you felt empowered in what you were doing and it felt good. Or a time when you felt happy and fulfilled. You're in that place of flow where it feels exactly where you're supposed to be. And it's happy and it's comfortable and it's your spot. You got it? Did you jot something down? Right? It's important. Right? So you got this in your head. Here's the thing. Obstacles are tricky deals. It's very easy to be tripped up by an obstacle. What this is a technique to help you overcome those obstacles. It's called priming, and it works with your brain. So here's what happens. The next time you are facing one of those obstacles, whatever it is, you're going to think about what you just wrote down. What do you want to achieve? Your inspired action. A time when you felt powerful, a time when you felt fulfilled. And when you bring that into your mind, before you deal with that obstacle, it literally changes the wiring in your brain. And it puts you in a different frame of mind to address that obstacle. So let's say you have to deal with that annoying person on your team that is so difficult. Or maybe you've got a new team that you're working with, and you've got to walk in the door and be a contributor and a leader. Or maybe you've applied for that big job, and you're going in for the interview. Here's what the research tells us about priming. If you prime yourself with those things that you just wrote down in advance of dealing with that obstacle, you go into that business interview, the odds of acceptance have just increased 81%. I'll take those odds. If you're about to become a leader of a new group, you are 60% more likely to be perceived as a leader in a group activity when you prime yourself first. That's also pretty good odds. You're just helping your brain to give yourself that extra edge to overcome the obstacle that allows you to achieve your inspired purpose. So let's see what else we got in here. This one's probably my favorite. It says, fulfill your purpose. Fulfill your purpose. This is Vicki Ruiz. Vicki Ruiz was the first person in her family to go to college. She got a PhD. She showed up for her first job with one baby, another one on the way. She has been a major contributor to Latina history. She couldn't have done that unless she was fulfilling her purpose. There is no greater motivator than to know that you're fulfilling your purpose. Are you reaching for your purpose? Are you reaching for your purpose? And again, it doesn't have to be an Oscar-winning film, The Great American Novel. What's your purpose? Are you putting yourself out there to reach for it? Now, women, we have a particular problem with this one. We too often sell ourselves short. We underestimate our potential. We underestimate our skills. We underestimate our abilities. We underestimate our leadership abilities. And we hold back and we don't put ourselves out there. And you cannot fulfill your purpose if you don't put yourself out there. Look at this research. There was a quiz given on scientific reasoning. Before they gave the quiz, they asked the participants, how do you think you're going to do on the quiz on a scale of 1 to 10? Check this out. Women, 6.5. Going to do okay. I mean, it's going to be fine. They took the quiz. They were asked again, how do you think you did on the quiz? Look at this. Women, oh, it was awful. Oh, I did terrible, I blew it. Men, did okay. Not about like I expected. So now think about this. This is important. If you were in a position to hire someone as the next team leader, the next project manager, just think about the difference in demeanor, the difference in the way you carry yourself. If you're thinking to yourself, I did terrible on that, versus I did okay on that. Right here, we have a differentiator that we can overcome. You want to see the actual scores? Why do we do this? We listen to that little negative voice in the head, right? And that little voice tells us things that we would never accept from anybody else. And we pay attention to that little voice. This story gets worse. The same people were asked to participate in a science competition before they knew how they did on the quiz. Opportunity to participate in a scientific competition. 71% of the men said, sure, I'll participate. You ready? 49% of the women. You cannot fulfill your purpose if you don't even try. You have to put yourself out there and accept the power that you hold right now. You will never fulfill the purpose if you never even try. You know, I told you about my dad. He was a band director. He was an Air Force pilot. He taught me to play the piano. He taught my sister to fly. My sister was in high school when she first got her first pilot license. She always knew that flying was part of her purpose, but she never pursued it. Now, we lost my dad almost 16 years ago. Hard to believe. And when he passed away, it was a big change in my sister's life. And she determined at that moment to pursue her flying career. She was 35. Anybody here a pilot? No pilots. I'll just share this with you. It would be considered crazy to start a flying career at the age of 35, and she was not in the military. Never mind. She quit her job. She took a position as a receptionist in a corporate flight company, and she started working on her ratings. She worked her way up to be the assistant to the president. So while she's working on her ratings. She became a corporate flight attendant while she's working on her ratings. My sister is the little blonde in the back with her hair up. That's Allison. This is taken in a flight simulator. This is at Flight Safety in Wilmington, Delaware. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. The woman in the front with the long blonde hair, she's an A-10 Warthog pilot for the National Guard. The woman, the brunette, is the co-pilot instructor for that simulator. Today, my sister has her Lear 35 type rating, her Gulfstream 100 type rating. She is an ATP licensed fixed wing with a rotor add-on. I couldn't be more proud. She and her husband together run a helicopter flight business in Oregon. She couldn't have done it if she hadn't put herself out there. And everybody here has that power to take what you want in life and put yourself out there to fulfill your purpose. There's nothing that feels better. One last thread. Gratitude. Gratitude. I've been showing you pictures of some of the women who've been honored in Women's History Month. This woman did nothing remarkable. Not one thing remarkable, except be an extraordinary grandmother. I, to this day, cannot smell vinegar without being transported back to her little farmhouse dyeing Easter eggs. And just so you know, our Easter eggs never looked like those, right? They were dark on one side, light on the other. You had that little wax pencil that never quite worked right. Yeah. We'd sit out on the front porch. She'd teach me Baptist hymns because her dad was a circuit riding preacher. And that's the way you pronounce that, by the way. Circuit riding preacher. It's in Texas. We shelled pecans. We snapped peas. She taught me how to make cinnamon rolls. I am so grateful for the upbringing that she gave me. And that's my question to you. Who are you grateful for? Who are the unsung heroes in your story? And if they're still around, can you go sing them? So we've talked about, what are you teaching? When people see your behavior, what are you teaching? How do you overcome those obstacles? Use that priming technique to overcome obstacles to inspired action. How to fulfill your purpose, to put yourself out there to fulfill your purpose and to do all of it from a place of gratitude. Now, I asked you at the beginning for stories from your childhood that still impact you today. So I want to hear just one or two examples from you. What'd you come up with? Yes, ma'am. If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing. And I assume that still resonates with you today. Absolutely. Somebody else. Yes. Mm-hmm. You owe it to yourself to at least try, because if not, you'll wonder what if. Do you hear how those stories are threads in your life? Everybody here has those. Here's the last thought that I want to leave you with. So far today, we've talked about individual threads. But guess what happens when you weave them all together? When you weave them all together, those threads of your life, they create something beautiful. They create something warm and comfortable for your life. And guess what? When you get those holes in your life, and you do, those other threads, they hold it all together from a place of strength. My grandmother made this Afghan for me. It represents all the things we've talked about. The threads that are in your life that make you who you are. Because guess what? When you weave those threads together, what you get is your gift. The gift that you have to offer to everyone else, the gift that's been given to you. And everybody here, you have your own gift. You've got it right now. You only have to use it. And I am Shelley Rowe. I am a leadership decision-making expert and a recovering overthinker. Thank you so much for letting me be here.